Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life when you realize the walls around you are not made of circumstance, they are made of thought. You have been fighting battles on the outside while the real war has been happening on the inside, and until your mind changes, your life will keep repeating the same season with different faces, different places, and the same pain. You don't live the way you do because of where you came from. You live the way you do because of what you keep rehearsing in your mind. Every day, your thoughts are giving instructions to your future. What you believe whispers to what you become. That's why if you want a new life, you cannot keep an old mindset and expect a new outcome. Some of you have been praying for doors to open, but your thinking is still locked. You are asking for elevation while entertaining limitations. You are asking for growth while feeding fear. You cannot build a strong life with a broken pattern of thinking. Before God changes your situation, He often changes your perception. Rewiring your mind means unlearning what survival taught you. It means recognizing that what protected you in one season may now be preventing you from prospering in another. You learn to stay quiet to avoid pain. You learn to shrink to stay safe. But now that same mindset is suffocating your potential. You don't need another miracle, you need another mindset. Your mind is a construction site. Every thought is either laying bricks or tearing them down. You keep telling yourself, I can't. You are building a ceiling over your own head. When you keep replaying failure, you are reinforcing fear. When you choose discipline over emotion, truth over trauma, and purpose over pain, you begin to rebuild from the inside out. Stop letting yesterday narrate today. Just because it happened to you does not mean it has to live in you. You can acknowledge the wound without giving it the microphone. Healing begins when you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start declaring, this did not happen to break me, it happened to build me. You cannot build a new life with old habits. Your routines are revealing your results. If you wake up thinking small, speaking doubt, and surrounding yourself with limitation, don't be surprised when your life reflects it. Change the conversation in your head, and you will change the construction of your future. There will be resistance. Growth always offends comfort. Your old mind will fight your new direction, but don't retreat. This discomfort is not destruction, it's renovation. Walls are coming down so something stronger can stand in its place. Rewire your mind, and you will stop reacting and start responding. You will stop surviving and start living. You will stop waiting for permission and start walking in purpose. When your thinking aligns with your calling, your life will finally have the structure to hold the blessing you've been praying for. Most people spend their lives wrestling with circumstances, trying to change what is happening around them, never realizing that the greatest influence on their life is not external pressure, but internal perspective. Long before situations shape outcomes, thoughts shape direction. The way you think quietly determines the way you live. Your life is not simply the result of what happened to you, where you were born, or what resources you had access to. Your life is the product of the mindset you carried through those experiences. Two people can walk through the same storm and come out with completely different futures. One becomes bitter, the other becomes better. One gives up, grows stronger. The difference is not the storm, the difference is the mind. Circumstances may apply pressure, but thinking decides whether that pressure produces diamonds or dust. What you consistently tell yourself about your life eventually becomes the life you live. Many people unknowingly allow their past to dominate their present. They rehearse old failures, repeat old disappointments, and relive old pain until it becomes a belief system. Over time, that belief system shapes decisions. Decisions shape habits. Habits shape lifestyle. Lifestyle becomes destiny. Long before life breaks down on the outside, it collapses on the inside through unchecked thoughts that were never challenged. Your thinking acts like a lens. It does not change reality, but it determines how you interpret reality. When your lens is cracked by fear, trauma, or insecurity, everything you look at appears distorted. Opportunities look like threats. Growth feels like risk. Responsibility feels like pressure. You begin to mistake comfort for safety and limitation for wisdom. In that state, Even blessings can feel overwhelming because the mind was never prepared to handle expansion. Circumstances do not have the power people think they do. They can influence you, but they cannot define you unless you allow them to. Poverty does not automatically create a poor mindset, just as wealth does not guarantee abundance thinking. Some people escape difficult environments, but never escape the thinking that environment taught them. Remain in challenging conditions, yet develop a mindset strong enough to outgrow them. The body may be in one place, but mind is already living somewhere else. When your thinking is small, life feels narrow. You hesitate to try because failure feels final. You settle because risk feels dangerous. You delay because fear sounds logical. Over time, you begin to call that mindset reality, not realizing it is simply repetition. You have thought the same thoughts for so long that they now feel true. Even when they are limiting, familiarity has disguised itself as truth. Your thoughts are powerful because they influence what you expect. What you expect determines how you prepare. If you expect disappointment, you will unconsciously sabotage opportunities. If you expect rejection, you will avoid connection. If you expect failure, you will hesitate at critical moments. Life often responds not to what you want, but to what you anticipate. Expectations quietly give instructions to your behavior. Changing your life does not start with changing your location, your relationships, or your income. It starts with changing your internal dialogue. The voice you listen to the most is the one inside your head. If that voice is constantly negative, critical, fearful, it will drain your confidence long before life ever challenges you. You cannot consistently rise above the level of thinking you tolerate. This is why growth feels uncomfortable. When your thinking begins to expand, it challenges the identity you built to survive. You start realizing that some beliefs were never facts, they were coping mechanisms. You were not incapable, you were cautious. You were not unqualified, you were unexposed. You were not weak, you were wounded. As understanding grows, excuses lose their grip and responsibility takes its place. A renewed way of thinking does not ignore reality, it interprets it differently. It acknowledges pain without allowing pain to lead. It recognizes limitations without surrendering to them. It understands that failure is not a verdict, but feedback. This kind of thinking does not deny hardship, but it refuses to be defined by it. It understands that today's struggle is not tomorrow's sentence. When your thinking changes, your behavior follows. You begin to speak differently, choose differently, and respond differently. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. You become less controlled by impulse and more guided by purpose. Slowly, consistently, your life begins to shift because circumstances magically disappeared, but because you now have the mental strength to navigate them. Life rewards alignment. When your thoughts align with growth, your actions align with discipline. When your actions align with discipline, your results align with progress. This is how transformation happens. Not overnight, not through motivation alone, but through daily mental renewal. You begin to replace fear with focus, excuses with effort, and doubt with determination. Your circumstances may explain where you are, but they do not have the authority to decide where you are going. Authority belongs to your thinking. When you take responsibility for your mind, you take responsibility for your future. You stop waiting for life to change and start changing the way you live life. Your life will always move in the direction your mind leads it. Elevate your thinking, and your life will eventually rise to meet it. Guard your thoughts, challenge your assumptions, and refuse to let temporary conditions dictate permanent beliefs. When your mind grows, your life has no choice but to follow. There are moments in life when everything around you begins to change, yet nothing within you has shifted. New doors open, new opportunities appear, and new seasons arrive, but instead of moving forward with confidence, you hesitate, retreat, or self-sabotage, not because the opportunity is wrong, but because the mindset you are carrying belongs to a season that has already passed. Many people lose what they prayed for, not because they were unqualified, but because they tried to manage a new season with an old way of thinking. Every season demands a different mindset. What helped you survive will not always help you succeed. In one season, being cautious kept you safe. In another, that same caution becomes fear. In one season, Silence protected you. In another, silence cost you your voice. Growth requires discernment, and discernment begins in the mind. When your thinking does not evolve, your life cannot expand. Old mindsets are often formed in moments of pain, pressure, or lack. They are not born out of purpose, but out of necessity. You learned how to cope, how to endure, how to get through. But coping is not the same as building. Endurance is not the same as expansion. Survival thinking keeps you alive, but it rarely allows you to thrive. If you carry a survival mindset into a season of abundance, you will mishandle what you once begged for. This is why some people become uncomfortable when life starts improving. They are not used to peace, so they create chaos. They are not familiar with stability, so they distrust it. They are not accustomed to being valued, so they question it. The mind tries to return to what feels familiar, even when what is familiar is unhealthy. Comfort does not always mean good. Sometimes it simply means known. Old mindsets sabotage new seasons by distorting perception. You interpret progress through the lens of past failure. You measure current relationships by old betrayals. You approach new responsibilities with outdated insecurities. Instead of seeing growth, you see risk. Instead of seeing opportunity, you see pressure. The season has changed, but your interpretation has not. When a mindset is outdated, it resists responsibility. It convinces you to play small when you are called to step up. It whispers that you are not ready, not worthy, not capable. It reminds you of who you used to be instead of recognizing who you are becoming. Over time, this internal resistance becomes external delay. You stall in a season that requires movement. A new season often exposes old thinking because growth demands visibility. You can no longer hide behind excuses, familiar routines, or past identities. What once went unnoticed now becomes obvious. The mindset that kept you unnoticed in the last season will not sustain you in this one. Elevation requires adjustment. Promotion requires preparation. Preparation begins with renewing the mind. Holding on to an old mindset is like wearing winter clothes in the summer. Once protected you now weighs you down. You feel uncomfortable, restricted, and out of place. Instead of enjoying the season, you struggle within it. Many people blame the season when the real issue is the mindset they refuse to release. Letting go of old thinking is not easy because it often feels like letting go of identity. You have attached who you are to what you survived. Survival is not your final story. You are not meant to live forever in reaction mode. A new season requires intentional thinking. It requires courage to confront beliefs that no longer serve you. It requires humility to admit that some thoughts were never truths, just habits. Old mindsets also sabotage new seasons by resisting trust. You trust outcomes instead of process. You trust control instead of growth. You trust familiarity instead of potential. But new seasons require faith. They require you to move without seeing every step. They require you to believe beyond what you have experienced. Without mental renewal, faith feels reckless instead of reasonable. Transformation happens when you give yourself permission to think differently. You stop defining yourself by what you lacked and start aligning with what you are becoming. When you stop assuming danger where there is opportunity. When you stop rehearsing failure in a season that demands confidence. This mental shift is not denial of the past, but proper placement of it. A new season does not erase old lessons, but it does require new language, new posture, and new expectations. You carry wisdom forward, not wounds. You take lessons, not limitations. You honor the past without allowing it to dominate the present. This is how growth stays healthy and sustainable. If you want to fully step into a new season, you must release the mindset that belongs to the old one. You cannot build tomorrow while thinking like yesterday. You cannot sustain growth with survival habits. You cannot walk in purpose while clinging to fear. Renewal of the mind is not optional, it is essential. New seasons are fragile. They require care, awareness, and alignment. Protect them by updating your thinking, challenge old beliefs, replace fear with clarity, replace doubt with discipline. When your mindset aligns with the season you are in, your life will finally stop resisting the very growth it was designed to experience. Many people desire change. Few understand what true transformation requires. They want a new life, new results, new peace, and new direction. yet they continue to think the same way they always have. They recycle the same thoughts, rehearse the same fears, and replay the same disappointments, then wonder why nothing truly changes. A new life cannot be built on old thinking. You may change your environment, your relationships, or your routine. If your thoughts remain the same, your life will eventually return to familiar patterns. Recycled thoughts are comfortable because they are familiar. They have been used before, tested in survival, and reinforced by repetition. Even when they are negative, they feel safe because they are known. The mind prefers familiarity over uncertainty, even if familiarity limits growth. This is why people leave situations but carry the same outcomes into new spaces. They change locations, but they do not change perspectives. Thoughts are not neutral. They are architects. Every thought is either designing your future or reinforcing your past. When you recycle thoughts of fear, scarcity, and self-doubt, you are using old blueprints to construct a new life. No matter how beautiful the vision, the structure will be weak because the foundation was never renewed. Strong lives require fresh thinking. A recycled thought often sounds logical because it has history behind it. This never works out for me. I tried before and failed. People always let me down. These thoughts feel justified because they are connected to real experiences. Experience does not always produce truth. Sometimes it produces conclusions that were formed in pain. When those conclusions go unchallenged, they become mental limits disguised as wisdom. You cannot build forward while thinking backward. The mind must move before the life can follow. If your thinking is stuck in what happened, it cannot fully engage with what is possible. Every time you replay old disappointments, you drain energy from new opportunities. You approach the future with suspicion instead of expectation. Hope feels risky because disappointment feels familiar. Recycled thoughts also affect identity. You begin to see yourself through outdated labels. You define yourself by who you were instead of who you are becoming. You say things like, I'm just not that kind of person, or this is just how I am, not realizing that growth requires permission to evolve. Identity rooted in old thinking resists new behavior. You cannot act differently if you refuse to think differently about yourself. Building a new life requires mental courage. It requires the willingness to question your own thoughts. Not every thought deserves agreement. Some thoughts need correction, not confirmation. Just because a thought arrives does not mean it belongs. The mind produces ideas based on memory, habit, and emotion, but wisdom chooses which thoughts to keep and which to release. Recycled thoughts create emotional exhaustion. Feel tired without doing anything new because your mind is constantly revisiting the same internal conversations, the same arguments, the same worries, the same regrets. This mental repetition drains creativity, motivation, and peace. A new life requires mental space, and mental space is created when old thoughts are released. When you renew your thinking, your responses change. You stop reacting automatically and start responding intentionally. You begin to choose growth over comfort, truth over familiarity, and discipline over impulse. This is not denial of reality. It is alignment with purpose. You still acknowledge challenges. You no longer allow them to dictate your self-worth or direction. A new life demands new language. What you speak reinforces what you think. When your words are filled with recycled phrases of doubt and limitation, your mind stays trapped in old cycles. But when you begin to speak with intention, clarity, and vision, your thinking starts to shift. Language gives structure to thought, and thought gives direction to life. Letting go of recycled thoughts does not mean forgetting the past. It means placing it in its proper position. The past becomes a reference, not a residence. You learn from it without living in it. You carry lessons forward, not fear. This shift frees the mind to engage with the present fully and the future confidently. You cannot build a new life with recycled thoughts because growth requires innovation. It requires imagination. It requires the ability to see beyond what has been and believe in what can be. Old thinking limits vision. New thinking expands it. When your mind is renewed, your choices change. When your choices change, your habits shift. And when your habits shift, your life begins to reflect the transformation that started within. If you truly want a new life, start by examining your thoughts. Identify what you have been recycling out of habit instead of intention. Release what no longer serves you. Replace it with thoughts that align with growth, healing, and purpose. A new life begins the moment you stop feeding old thinking and start cultivating a renewed mind. Every life is under construction, whether you are aware of it or not. The question is not whether something is being built, but what is being built and who is doing the building. Long before your future shows up in your circumstances, it is first shaped in your thoughts. Thoughts are never passive. They are active forces, silently laying foundations, raising walls, or tearing structures down. What you consistently think is either constructing a future you can grow into or destroying possibilities before they ever arrive. Most people underestimate the power of a single thought because it feels small and invisible. But thoughts are seeds. One seed does not look like a forest, yet given time, repetition, and attention, it determines what eventually grows. A thought repeated becomes a belief. A belief repeated becomes a behavior. A behavior repeated becomes a lifestyle, and a lifestyle repeated becomes a destiny. By the time the future feels unchangeable, the construction has already been happening for years in the mind. Constructive thoughts are not always loud or dramatic. Often they are quiet, disciplined, intentional. They say things like, I can learn this, I will grow through this, or this is difficult. It is not final. These thoughts do not deny struggle, but they refuse to surrender to it. They create internal stability even when external conditions are unstable. Over time, constructive thinking builds resilience, clarity, and confidence. It creates a future with options instead of excuses. Destructive thoughts, on the other hand, are subtle and persuasive. They sound reasonable because they are rooted in emotion and past experience. They say, this is just how life is. I always fail, or there's no point in trying. These thoughts slowly erode hope. They weaken initiative. They drain motivation. Destructive thinking does not usually arrive as chaos. It arrives as comfort. It invites you to stop trying, stop expecting, stop believing. And what you stop believing in, you stop building toward. Your mind is the most influential environment you will ever live in. You spend more time inside your thoughts than anywhere else. If that environment is filled with fear, doubt, and negativity, it will shape how you see the world and how you move within it. Opportunities will feel threatening. Responsibility will feel overwhelming. Growth will feel exhausting. Not because these things are inherently negative, but because destructive thinking has already framed them that way. Thoughts also determine how you respond to failure. When constructive thinking is present, failure becomes feedback. It becomes information, not identity. You ask, what can I learn? Instead of declaring, this proves I am not capable. But when destructive thinking dominates, failure feels personal and permanent. One mistake becomes a label. One setback becomes a sentence. Over time, this mindset destroys the courage needed to keep building. The future is shaped not by what you intend occasionally, but by what you think consistently. You may have moments of motivation, inspiration, or clarity, but if your daily thinking remains negative, fearful, or unfocused, those moments will not last. Construction requires consistency. Just as a building cannot stand without daily work, a strong future cannot exist without daily mental alignment. Thoughts influence language, and language reinforces direction. What you speak often reveals what you believe. If your words are filled with complaint, defeat, and limitation, your future will reflect stagnation. But when your words are shaped by faith, focus, and responsibility, they begin to give shape to possibility. Language is not just expression, it is instruction. It tells your mind what to expect and your actions how to respond. Destructive thoughts often masquerade as realism. They claim to be protecting you from disappointment, but in reality, they are protecting you from growth. They convince you to lower expectations, avoid risk, and settle for less. Over time, this mindset quietly destroys the future you were capable of building. Not because you lacked ability, but because you lack belief. Constructive thinking requires discipline. It does not come automatically, especially if you have lived through trauma, disappointment, or loss. The mind will naturally return to what is familiar. This is why renewal must be intentional. You must challenge thoughts instead of accepting them. You must ask whether a thought is helping you build or inviting you to retreat. Awareness is the first step in mental transformation. When you begin to monitor your thoughts, You regain authority over your future. You stop letting emotion drive direction. You stop letting fear make decisions. You become intentional about what you allow to take root in your mind. This shift does not make life easy, but it makes growth possible. It ensures that even in difficult seasons, you are still building, not breaking down. Your future is not something that happens to you. It is something you participate in creating thought by thought, decision by decision. Every constructive thought strengthens the foundation. Every destructive thought weakens it. You may not see the impact immediately, but over time, structure will reveal the quality of the thinking behind it. If you want a future that is strong, stable, and expansive, begin by honoring the power of your thoughts. Guard them carefully. Guide them intentionally. Choose thoughts that build courage, responsibility, and hope. Because in the end, your thoughts are always working. They are either constructing a future you can step into with confidence or destroying it before it ever has the chance to stand. Trauma has a way of disguising itself as wisdom. What once protected you in moments of pain slowly becomes the voice you trust the most. Without realizing it, decisions begin to flow not from clarity, purpose, or growth, but from memory, fear, and self-preservation. This is how trauma stays in control long after the event has passed. Healing does not begin when life becomes easier. Healing begins when trauma no longer has the authority to decide how you live. Trauma teaches you how to survive, not how to live. It sharpens your instincts, heightens your awareness, and builds defenses. In the moment, these responses are necessary. They keep you safe. They help you endure. When survival mechanisms remain active in seasons that require trust, expansion, and vulnerability, they become barriers instead of protection. What once saved you can later imprison you. Many people believe they are making rational decisions, when in reality, they are making familiar ones. Trauma influences choices quietly. It tells you who to avoid, when to retreat, and what to expect. It shapes how you love, how you work, how you rest, and how you respond to conflict. You may think you are being careful, but often you are being controlled by fear that was never healed. Trauma leads your decisions. Your life becomes reactive instead of intentional. You say yes when you should say no simply to avoid conflict. You say no when you should say yes, simply to avoid disappointment. You stay in unhealthy patterns because uncertainty feels more dangerous than pain you already know. Trauma convinces you that predictability equals safety, even when predictability is destructive. One of the most subtle ways trauma leads is through overcorrection. If you were once abandoned, you may cling too tightly or refuse connection altogether. If you were once silenced, you may avoid expressing your needs or become overly defensive when challenged. If you were once controlled, you may resist any form of guidance, even healthy accountability. These reactions feel justified because they are rooted in real experiences. They are still responses driven by pain rather than purpose. Healing requires honesty, not just about what happened, but about how it still affects you. You cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. Trauma does not lose power because time passed. It loses power when it is faced, named, and understood. Awareness is the first interruption of its influence. When you begin to recognize that certain patterns are trauma responses, not personality traits, you create space for change. When trauma stops leading your decisions, discernment replaces fear. You begin to pause instead of panic. You ask questions instead of assuming danger. You respond instead of reacting. This does not mean you ignore your past or dismiss your pain. It means you no longer allow pain to hold the steering wheel. You honor your experiences without surrendering your future to them. Healing is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming free. Free to choose based on values instead of wounds. Free to trust without losing wisdom. Free to love without losing yourself. This kind of freedom does not come instantly. It comes through repetition of healthy choices, even when old instincts protest. Trauma often convinces you that control is safety, so you overthink, you overplan, you overprotect. True healing introduces a different kind of security, one rooted in self-trust. You begin to trust your ability to navigate discomfort instead of trying to eliminate it. You realize that uncertainty is not the enemy. avoidance is. When trauma no longer leads, your relationships change. You stop expecting people to pay for what someone else did. You stop projecting old wounds onto new connections. You communicate more clearly, set healthier boundaries, and allow intimacy to grow at a pace guided by wisdom rather than fear. Healing does not erase caution, it refines it. Your sense of identity also begins to shift. You stop defining yourself by what hurt you. You stop introducing yourself through your scars. Your story expands beyond survival. You begin to see yourself as capable, resilient, and evolving. Trauma becomes a chapter, not the title. This process requires patience. There will be moments when old patterns resurface, especially under stress. Healing is not linear. Each time you choose awareness over autopilot, you weaken trauma's grip. Each time you pause, reflect, and respond differently, you reinforce healing. Healing begins when trauma stops leading your decisions because leadership determines direction. When pain leads, life shrinks. When purpose leads, life expands. You are not dishonoring your past by choosing differently in the present. You are honoring your growth. Long before results appear, habits are already speaking. Quietly tell the story of what you believe, what you prioritize, and what you expect from yourself. You may explain your life through circumstances, opportunities, or lack thereof, but beneath all of that, habits reveal the true structure of your life. They show what is stable, what is neglected, what is slowly collapsing. You do not live by intention alone, you live by repetition. Many people focus on major moments, big decisions, dramatic turning points, yet overlook the power of daily patterns. But life is not built in one day. It is built in small, repeated choices that stack up over time. What you do consistently forms the framework that holds your life together. If the structure is weak, it will not matter how strong your desires are. Desire without discipline cannot sustain growth. Habits are visible expressions of invisible beliefs. The way you manage your time reveals what you value. The way you manage your energy reveals what you respect. The way you manage your words reveals what you believe about yourself and others. You may say you want change. Your habits reveal whether you are preparing for it. You may say you want peace, but your habits reveal whether you are protecting it. A strong structure is not built by occasional effort. It is built by consistent alignment. Just as a building depends on its foundation, beams, and supports, your life depends on routines that hold you steady when motivation fades. Habits are what carry you when emotions fluctuate. They keep you moving when excitement disappears. Without solid habits, life becomes reactionary, unstable, and exhausting. Unhealthy habits do not usually appear overnight. They form slowly, often disguised as comfort or convenience. Skipping rest becomes normal. Ignoring boundaries becomes routine. Settling for less becomes familiar. Over time, these patterns weaken the structure of your life. You may still be standing, but cracks begin to show. Stress increases. Focus decreases. Peace becomes fragile. What looks like burnout on the surface is often structural neglect underneath. Habits also determine capacity. You cannot carry more responsibility than your structure can support. When opportunity arrives and you feel overwhelmed, it is often not because the opportunity is too big, but because the habits supporting your life are too small. Growth exposes structure. Success tests sustainability. If your habits are undeveloped, expansion will feel like pressure instead of progress. Many people want a better life without building better systems. They rely on motivation, inspiration, or external pressure to change. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Habits remain. They do not depend on how you feel. They operate on who you have trained yourself to be. This is why habits reveal your true level of commitment. They show what you do when no one is watching and when nothing is urgent. Changing habits requires honesty. You cannot fix what you refuse to face. If your life feels chaotic, examine your routines. If your goals feel distant, examine your daily actions. If your peace feels fragile, examine what you consistently allow into your mind and environment. The structure of your life is not hidden. It is visible in how you live each day. Healthy habits are not glamorous. They are often boring, repetitive, unnoticed, but they create stability. They reduce decision fatigue. They free mental space for creativity and growth. When your habits are aligned, you no longer waste energy fighting yourself. Discipline becomes support, not restriction. Habits also shape identity. You become what you repeatedly do. If your habits reinforce confidence, responsibility, and self-respect, your identity strengthens. If your habits reinforce avoidance, inconsistency, and neglect, your self-trust erodes. Over time, you stop believing in what you say you want because your habits have taught you what to expect from yourself. Rebuilding the structure of your life does not require drastic change all at once. It requires intentional change over time. One habit adjusted can support many areas of your life. One consistent routine can bring order to chaos. One disciplined choice repeated daily can restore stability where there was once stress. Habits are not punishment, they are protection. They protect your energy, your focus, and your future. They keep you aligned when life pulls you in multiple directions. When you respect the power of habits, you begin to build a life that can withstand pressure without collapsing. If you want to understand your life, look at your habits. They tell the truth. They reveal the structure you are living in and the one you are building. Strengthen your habits and you strengthen your life. Discomfort has a bad reputation. We are taught to avoid it, escape it, and numb it whenever possible. We equate discomfort with danger, failure, or something going wrong. But often, discomfort is not a warning sign, it is a work in progress sign. It is evidence that something inside you is being adjusted, upgraded, and restructured. Discomfort is often the sound of internal renovation taking place. When walls are being torn down and foundations are being reinforced, there is noise, dust, and disruption. Nothing about renovation feels peaceful while it is happening. Yet the chaos is not destruction, it is preparation. In the same way, internal growth rarely feels comfortable. When old patterns are challenged and new capacities are forming, discomfort naturally follows. What you feel as unease may actually be progress. Many people abandon growth because it does not feel good at first. They assume that if something is right, it should feel easy, but ease often belongs to familiarity, not transformation. Comfort usually means nothing is changing. Discomfort means something is shifting. It means you are being stretched beyond what you have known and into what you are becoming. Internal renovation begins when old beliefs start to crumble. You question ideas you once accepted without thought. You notice behaviors that no longer align with who you want to be. You feel tension between your past identity and your future direction. This tension can feel unsettling because it removes certainty. Uncertainty is not weakness, it is space. Space for growth, clarity, and renewal. Discomfort also appears when responsibility increases. New levels require new discipline. You become aware that some habits must change, some boundaries must be enforced, and some conversations can no longer be avoided. Avoidance feels easier in the moment, but growth demands courage. The discomfort you feel is often the resistance of old comfort zones being challenged. When internal renovation is happening, emotions can feel intensified. You may feel restless, irritable, or unsure of yourself. This does not mean you are regressing. It often means your mind is adjusted to a new way of thinking. Just as muscles ache when they are growing stronger, the mind and spirit experience strain when they are expanding. Growth has a sensation. That sensation is often discomfort. Many people mistake this phase and retreat. They go back to what is familiar because it feels safer. What feels safe is not always what is healthy. Old patterns offer immediate comfort but long-term stagnation. New patterns offer temporary discomfort but lasting stability. Renovation requires patience. You cannot rush rebuilding without risking collapse. Discomfort also exposes attachments. When something is being removed, the discomfort reveals how tightly you were holding on. You realize that some relationships, habits, or mindsets were not supporting you, they were defining you. Letting go feels like loss even when what you are losing is limiting you. This grief is part of the renovation process. Internal renovation demands trust. Trust that the discomfort has purpose. Trust that the process is leading somewhere meaningful. Trust that you are not breaking down, but being built up. This trust is not blind optimism. It is informed resilience. It comes from recognizing that every season of growth you have experienced began with unease. As renovation progresses, clarity begins to emerge. You start to understand why certain changes were necessary. What once felt confusing starts to make sense. You gain insight into your patterns, your triggers, and your strengths. The discomfort shifts from overwhelming to instructive. It teaches you where growth is happening and where attention is needed. Eventually, the noise settles, the dust clears. What remains is stronger, more intentional, and more aligned. You stand differently, you think differently, you respond differently. The discomfort fades, but the growth remains. What once felt foreign becomes familiar. What once felt difficult becomes natural. Discomfort is not your enemy, it is a signal. It tells you that something old is being replaced by something new. When you learn to interpret discomfort correctly, you stop running from it and start learning from it. You become less afraid of change and more committed to growth. If you are feeling uncomfortable right now, pause before you panic. Ask yourself what might be under construction. What belief is being challenged? What habit is being reshaped? What capacity is being expanded? Discomfort is often a sign that your internal space is being prepared for something better. Emotions are powerful. They are unreliable leaders. They rise quickly, shift without warning, and respond more to moments than to meaning. Yet many people allow emotions to sit in the driver's seat of their lives. They make decisions when they are angry, withdraw when they are afraid, quit when they feel tired. Over time, this pattern creates instability, inconsistency, and regret. Growth begins when discipline replaces emotional reactions, because discipline brings order where emotion brings impulse. Emotional reactions are natural, but they are not always wise. Feeling something does not mean you must follow it. Emotions are information, not instruction. They tell you what is happening inside you. They should not be the ones deciding what happens next. When emotions lead, decisions are often short-term, reactive, driven by relief rather than results. Discipline, on the other hand, is guided by values, vision, and long-term purpose. A life ruled by emotion is exhausting. One good day brings motivation. One bad moment brings collapse. You start strong, then disappear. You commit, then retreat, because you lack ability, but because feelings fluctuate. Discipline creates stability when feelings fluctuate. It keeps you moving when motivation fades. It holds the line when comfort calls you back. Emotional reactions often come from unhealed places. Anger may come from feeling unheard. Fear may come from past disappointment. Defensiveness may come from old wounds. When these emotions lead your decisions, past keeps repeating itself in new situations. Discipline interrupts that cycle. It creates space between feeling and action. In that space, wisdom can speak. Discipline does not mean suppressing emotion. It means mastering response. You acknowledge what you feel without allowing it to control what you do. You learn to pause instead of panic. You breathe instead of explode. You reflect instead of react. This pause is powerful. It turns chaos into clarity and impulse into intention. Many opportunities are lost because emotions were not managed. Words spoken in anger damage relationships. Decisions made in fear block progress. Comfort chosen in fatigue delays purpose. Discipline protects you from making permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. It allows you to act in alignment with who you want to become, not how you feel in the moment. Replacing emotional reactions with discipline not easy, especially in a world that encourages instant expression. You are told to say how you feel and do what feels right. But growth often requires doing what is right even when it does not feel good. Discipline chooses consistency over comfort. It chooses responsibility over relief. Discipline builds trust with yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it, you strengthen self-respect. Over time, confidence grows not from hype, from follow-through. You begin to believe in yourself because your actions are reliable. Emotional living weakens self-trust. Disciplined living restores it. When discipline replaces emotional reactions, your relationships improve. You stop reacting defensively and start communicating intentionally. You listen more. You respond thoughtfully. You set boundaries without guilt and express needs without aggression. Emotional reactions damage connection. Discipline preserves it. This shift also strengthens leadership. Whether you are leading a family, a business, or your own life, people trust consistency. They trust someone who does not collapse under pressure or lash out under stress. Discipline gives you emotional maturity. It allows you to remain steady in moments that would have once overwhelmed you. Discipline is developed, not discovered. It is built through small, repeated choices. You practice responding instead of reacting. You practice keeping commitments. You practice delaying gratification. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Emotions resist discipline because discipline removes their control. But over time, discipline becomes your new normal. Emotional reactions are loud, but discipline is quiet. It does not seek attention. It does not announce itself. It simply shows up day after day. Consistency changes everything. It changes how you work, how you love, how you heal, and how you grow. Life will always present emotional moments. Pressure will come. Conflict will arise. Disappointment will happen. Discipline does not remove emotion from life, but it ensures emotion does not ruin life. It teaches you how to feel deeply without acting destructively. When discipline replaces emotional reactions, progress becomes possible. You stop living in cycles and start building momentum. You stop being controlled by moods and start being guided by purpose. You stop reacting to life and start shaping it. Life is rarely shaken by circumstances alone. Storms, challenges, disappointments, and setbacks are part of the human experience. What determines whether we crumble or stand firm is not what happens to us, but how we think about what happens. A renewed mind has the power to transform experiences from obstacles into opportunities, pressure into progress, and trials into testimony. Your mind is renewed. It becomes the foundation of a sustainable and unshakable life because it operates from clarity, purpose, and truth rather than fear, doubt, and reaction. Renewal of the mind is not a one-time event. It is a process. It begins with awareness, the willingness to notice what is influencing your thoughts, emotions, and choices. For most people, life is dictated by unexamined patterns, habits, assumptions, and beliefs carried from past experiences. These patterns are often outdated and unproductive, may have protected you at one time, but they are no longer suitable for the life you are meant to build. A renewed mind asks, does this thinking serve me now? Does this belief strengthen my future or keep me trapped in the past? The process of renewal requires intentionality. It requires discipline to replace reactive thoughts with reflective ones. Requires courage to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself and to let go of old narratives that no longer support growth. For example, if you have carried thoughts of inadequacy for years, a renewed mind refuses to allow those thoughts to dictate your actions any longer. It challenges them, replaces them with truth, and practices believing the new narrative until it becomes stronger than the old. One of the most powerful aspects of a renewed mind is its ability to perceive reality accurately. Often, we live in distortion, mistaking fear for fact, possibility for risk, and limitation for destiny. A renewed mind recalibrates this perspective. It identifies where anxiety is exaggerating danger, where doubt is obscuring potential, and where pride is preventing growth. By thinking clearly and intentionally, the mind no longer reacts impulsively, responds with strategy, patience, and resilience. Sustainability in life comes from stability. When your mind is renewed, establishes internal stability that external circumstances cannot easily shake. Challenges may arise, people may disappoint, and plans may fail. A renewed mind keeps the foundation intact. You begin to operate from a place of strength and purpose, not panic and reaction. This stability allows for consistency in decisions, relationships, work, and personal growth, an essential factor for long-term success. Unshakable life is not about removing stress or avoiding conflict. It is about developing the inner capacity to remain anchored when stress and conflict inevitably arrive. A renewed mind equips you with the tools to handle difficulty without losing composure or direction. It teaches resilience not by avoiding hardship, but by redefining it. Every setback becomes an opportunity to practice patience, perseverance, and problem solving. Every disappointment becomes a lesson in adaptability and perspective. Renewal of the mind also strengthens emotional health. Thoughts influence feelings. Feelings influence actions. When your thoughts are distorted or negative, they create unnecessary emotional turmoil. But when the mind is renewed, thoughts are guided by truth, purpose, and vision. This clarity reduces anxiety, increases confidence, and fosters emotional intelligence. You respond to life rather than react. communicate effectively rather than lash out, and make decisions from strength rather than fear. Renewed mind fosters sustainable growth because it prioritizes the long term over the immediate. It resists instant gratification, impulsive reactions, and short-term thinking. Instead, it chooses discipline, consistency, and intentional action. You begin to build routines, habits, and relationships that support your vision rather than undermine it. Sustainability in life comes from alignment, when your thoughts, actions, and goals work together rather than at odds. Moreover, a renewed mind transforms relationships. When your thinking aligns with wisdom, empathy, and integrity, your interactions reflect the same. You stop projecting past pain onto current circumstances. You begin to communicate more clearly, listen more intentionally, love more genuinely. This stability in your relationships further strengthens the unshakable structure of your life. The mind that governs itself well governs all other areas of life with clarity and grace. Spiritual and personal alignment are also byproducts of a renewed mind. When thoughts are renewed, values and priorities become clearer. Decisions begin to reflect purpose rather than impulse. You stop chasing validation and start pursuing vision. You stop reacting to distraction and start responding to direction. Mind attuned to truth and principle creates a life that is naturally resistant to collapse because it operates from a foundation deeper than circumstance. Renewal also fuels creativity and problem solving. When the mind is clear and burdened by fear and repetitive doubt, it is free to innovate, explore, and adapt. Solutions arise more easily, opportunities become more visible, and potential becomes actionable. The unshakable life is not passive, it is active, engaged, productive. It does not wait for circumstances to improve. It cultivates the internal capacity to thrive regardless of external conditions. It gives a sense of possibility even in the face of setbacks. It refuses to be defined by failures or limited by history. It recognizes that mistakes are part of growth and that every challenge is temporary in the grand arc of life. Hope sustained by renewed thinking is unshakable because it is grounded in preparation, wisdom, and resilience rather than mere wishful thinking. In conclusion, a renewed mind is not a luxury. It is essential for building a life that is sustainable and unshakable. It is the foundation upon which decisions, actions, habits, and relationships are constructed. It allows clarity to guide reaction, purpose to replace confusion, and strength to outlast adversity. Your future is not dictated by circumstances alone, but by the state of your mind. When you commit to renewing your mind, replacing old patterns, embracing truth, and thinking with intention, you are not only preparing for growth, you are constructing a life that no storm can destroy. A life built on a renewed mind endures, prospers, and thrives because it is anchored in thought, disciplined in action, and guided by principle. Every challenge, trial, or uncertainty becomes part of the structure rather than a threat to it. When your mind is renewed, you are equipped to navigate life with purpose, peace, and power. You do not merely survive, you create, sustain, and flourish. This is the unshakable life that begins in the mind.